Every year, Shale and I like to have a talk that's really a professional development talk. And last year, the talk was about ego and leadership, and how leadership is improved with less ego. And this year, Shale said, we really need to talk about hard conversations, why we need to have them, what happens when we don't have them, being proactive with them. So we really need to talk about hard conversations. So as I started to dig into the talk, I really actually was having a hard time putting this one together because I'm really not good at it. I'm really not good at having hard conversations. The guy who's exceptional about having hard conversations is Shale Jane. And for those of us who have worked closely with him, just what are you trying to accomplish, challenging our thinking, you're wrong, it improves the result. Our results as a firm and in our dialogue are improved because of these hard conversations. So there was a large study that was done by one of the leading researchers, Jack Zengman, and 92% of the employees who were polled said that negative feedback is important to their personal development. 92% said that negative feedback is important to their personal development. So why do we avoid having these hard conversations, right? Okay, so what's a hard conversation? It's a conversation we're uncomfortable with. And one of the primary reasons why we're uncomfortable in having this conversation is because there's an element of conflict that's going to be involved in this conversation. It could be with one of our teammates. They're not maybe producing their deliverables to the detail we want. Maybe they didn't cover a dimension that we think they should be thinking through. It may be a client, right? Our client may be not living up to what they need to do for a project. We need to have a hard conversation. Are they going to not want to do business with us in the future? Are they going to fire us? Is our employee going to want to leave? Are they going to be offended? Right? So, should we have the conversation or not? So let's talk a little bit about why does it matter. So, we had yesterday in our opening, we had some great quotes from our clients, right? So we had United Healthcare, we had Covance, we had Citi. We got the Bristol-Myers Squibb CFO Award for our Tahoe projects. We deliver a lot of great projects. Projects that we have trouble with, when we really get under the covers and look at what happened, there was an inability to have that hard conversation. We avoided having a conversation that needed to be had. A couple of examples. Last year we had a 12-week strategy roadmap engagement. Week 2 or 3, we noticed that there was an issue with one of the team members producing deliverables to the detail we needed. We didn't have the conversation. Week 10, our client noticed that some of our deliverables were deficient. We had to bring in another senior person to help improve those deliverables as part of the team, make that additional investment. In the end, we delivered it, but it's a conversation we could have had sooner. What we denied having was a learning conversation so that information could have improved their outlook, their deliverables, and just improved the situation. We should have had it earlier. Large engineering project we had last year. We were dependent on the client to produce the technical environment that we were going to do our work on. It was a week late. They were 2 weeks late. 3 turned into 4. 4 turned into 5. Okay? Maybe they'll get their act together. Maybe they'll get their act together. Maybe they'll get their act together. We didn't proactively have that conversation with the client. Then, after we realized there's no way we're going to catch up, this situation is not getting better, we had the conversation. Then we produced an actual tangible change request, statement of work that we delivered to them. That's about 10 to 12 weeks later. The client took offense. We suffered reputational risk. We suffered financial impact, reputational impact. We could have delivered the project sooner is the real takeaway if we had addressed it earlier. Third scenario. We do a lot of great work for our clients, and this is a hard conversation that's a good conversation. We do free workshops for our clients. We do a lot of free work. We help them with deliverables. Do we have that hard conversation to remind them of all the good things that we do for them? Clients are certainly quick to remind us of times when we're deficient in what we're delivering for them, but do we take the opportunity to remind them of all the good work we do for them that's free, the benefits of our relationship? So what are some of those reasons that we avoid having the conversation? The first one is, right, we fear conflict. And I'll talk in the next slide about really why that is. We fear conflict, right? But let's also embrace the fact that inherent with business is conflict. Business, mandatory, there are hard conversations that are just going to be part of our career. So let's not worry about the things we can't change. You can't change it, embrace it, right? Second one, we can deny there's a problem. Well, we get evidence that there's a problem, we deny it. Day 2, we get evidence of the same problem, we deny it. Day 3, we get evidence of that problem, let's face the problem and have the hard conversation, right? The fourth one is the one that we really just alluded to. We think we can work around it. We think we can work around it. But if we have to do a workaround, it's really additional work. It might be a change to our project plan anyway. So our project's being impacted. Our projects are so interdependent with our clients that when we have an issue, raise it. And we'll talk about another slide later about how this conflict builds better relationships. So let's embrace it, let's do it earlier. And of course, the fourth one, we think the problem will solve itself, right? We know that they really don't, right? So why do we avoid having hard conversations? It's pure science. It's rooted in evolution, it's rooted in brain chemistry. Our body proactively seeks to protect us from conflict. It releases a stress-related hormone called cortisol. And cortisol gets released, it activates the amygdala, and the amygdala releases fear to our body to protect us and have us avoid getting into a situation that has conflict. It is all brain chemistry, okay? Our professional view of ourselves, our professional stature, our identity are aligned to our emotional brain. So when we get into a situation that's going to challenge that professional stature, that identity that we have, the same situation happens. Cortisol gets released and we try to avoid that situation that might potentially impact our professional stature and how we view ourselves, our identity. It's a pure case of the emotional brain being overruled by the rational brain. The rational brain of saying it's a benefit to our team, it's a benefit to my teammate, we're a better firm, my teammate gets better. Rational brain needs to win. Pure science. Great quote. So before we go through the quote, I'll give you the backdrop. So Eli Lilly, obviously one of our clients, partnerships are really important to Eli Lilly for their product development, drug development, clinical trials process. So because the partnerships were so important to them, they wanted to analyze their partnerships and find out what made them more productive. So they went through 14 years of data, and it revealed that in the relationships where there was conflict, there was an improved result, right? And they came up with this term they called productive irritation. So this is the person who led the diabetes group, and this is his comment. It's a great comment, right? So we just take our time and really enjoy this comment. Nothing great is achieved without conflict. Conflict sharpens the senses and invites full participation in solving important problems. Here's the best part. You must create more light than heat when you engage in conflict. Heat degrades the innovation while light catalyzes it. What this really is saying is that when we get overly emotional in some of these things, that's the heat. It degrades the innovation. But when you listen and analyze the conflicts that are there and the opinion that the other person happens, it catalyzes it. It improves the result. So when we approach these conversations, they're learning conversations. It's not about truth. It's not about right or wrong. It's about exposing the light and minimizing the heat, the emotion, keeping it out of it. And the advice is to approach it like a mediator, like a counselor, like a third party, because the objective is to get the other party talking so you can understand their viewpoint, get ourselves talking so they can understand ours, and in the end result, we both learn more about each other and we're better off. So Google did a large study of projects that they had and determined that there were 5 factors that led teams to significantly outperform other teams. The one factor out of the 5 that was much, much more important than the others is a term they call psychological safety. The ability for teams to share hard conversations with each other, but they got proactive about it. They built it into their team cadence, to the structure of how they ran their projects. So they created the mandatory dialogue amongst all the team members, right? And we're going to learn in another follow-on session about guardians and integrators and pioneers and drivers. And some of those personality types are not prone to be more proactive to sharing. They're not, right? They'll be more introverted, where if you're a pioneer and you're a driver, you're leading that conversation. So you're missing the input of some really, really smart, valuable people by not being proactive with soliciting hard conversations, okay? And that's what Google did. So they've implemented this process to their projects where they solicit, they're proactive with these hard conversations. So Shale's been using this phrase for years, right? Which is be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because our improvement as professionals, we improve because of conflict, that productive irritation that the Eli Lilly, person spoke about. It makes us better. So when we have that opportunity to be proactive with having that conversation early on in the project with our teammate, think about this dimension. I need more detail. I'm dependent on your deliverable, and I need more detail. Let's have that conversation earlier. When we see a client, and we're very, very interdependent with clients, when we see their tasks being delayed, we got to have that conversation, right? The fact that we delay, then it becomes our issue and not their issue. So we need to be proactive. So when given that opportunity to be proactive or reactive, it's proven that being proactive is a better result. We need to make sure that our rational brain wins out over the emotional brain. So, Shale, why don't you come up for this one, because you, of all people, I think, just kicking the can down the road. That's right. That's a good one. Address it now. So this is a beautiful, Shale Jane, welcome. So this is a really, really impactful quote from Ben Horowitz, and he wrote a book which is entitled The Hard Things About Hard Things, right? And he made this comment about Mark Andreessen, and they've been together really for 2 decades. Well, I've been together with this guy for 3 decades, okay? So if Ben Horowitz thinks Mark Andreessen has improved the results, this guy, he's got nothing on Shale Jane, okay? So listen to the last sentence here. With Mark and me, after 18 years, he upsets me almost every day by finding something wrong in my thinking, and I do the same for him. It works. Thank you.
By the way, Peter's the best sales guy I've ever known in my life, and all he's doing right now is selling me to you guys, okay? The other way, just the reverse of what he just said, is more true than what he just said, okay? So, we've observed this, both Peter and I, over time. How can we get better as a company, right? What are we missing? So I think last year's theme was ego. Last Kmmersion, we talked about ego. And the sooner we get ego out of our lives, the better we are. The more we learn, the better people we become, right? So I think that's one important lesson that we both have learned. The other is the hard conversation, as Peter just talked about. And about the hard conversation, so let's take the who, the what, how, and when, right? So who should have these hard conversations, right? So let's take the project team. I think it's the responsibility of everybody on the team. It's not just the client partner, the account partner, or the project manager, or even the project team member. Obviously, the team member should, consult with the project manager and so on. But I think it's important for everybody to take that as a responsibility, right? And what, which is very interesting. The what is, there's actually 2 types of hard conversations. You can actually have a bad hard conversation or a good hard conversation. And this one is a little subtle difference. But for example, a lot of times we go to the clients and talk about there's a project delay and it's going to cost you more money and the project's going to be late and so on and so forth, right? But we actually miss the opportunity to have a good hard conversation, which is to say, last week your environment wasn't available and we made up the time by working extra. My team worked extra hours to make the time up. Let them know that. It's a gift. Let them know that, because when you do have the bad hard conversation, it's going to come in handy, right? The other thing about the hard conversation is it's not really always about us, right? As Peter said. Think about what the impact of that bad news is to them as well. Because it's not about increasing our fees or changing the scope, but they're risking the project. They're risking the business value that the project's going to deliver as well. So I think that's important. In terms of when, I think this is the most critical decision that we got to make. I was kicking the can down the road here. It's the easiest thing you can do is kick the can down the road. We do this all the time. The best thing I can say is that bad news is always delivered hot, okay? So if you can deliver the bad news fresh, it's the best time to do it. So Peter talked about proactive versus reactive. So imagine if you brought a potential risk to the client up front rather than waiting for 3 or 4 weeks. You're actually helping the client because they want to get to the business results as well. And the sooner you let them know, the more opportunity they have to correct the problem as well. So I think this is probably the most important decision you have to make. And it's not an easy decision to say, when should I bring this up with the client? Or it's not just about the client, it's also about a team member, right? Let them know up front, say, listen, I think you're missing the mark, right? And it could be between peers, it could be, project manager to a team member, if you will. I think these are important things, and there is no clear, rule book we can give you to say, hey, this is check number 2, and this is where you go. I think the question here is the timing of having the hard conversation probably is the most important, and the subtle thing about having the good hard conversation, because the clients would remember that when you actually do end up having a hard conversation with them about some bad news that has happened.
Great.
So
Love it.
all right, that was my piece. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.